my name is Anne-Marie Pearman. I'm joined today by Zander Glasgow. Zander has suffered in the past with drug and alcohol problems. In 2016 and 17, he started the Big Questions Project. His second wife sadly passed away from cancer in 2017. From there, he subsequently started the peer support group, which helped people with bereavements or any mental health or addiction issues. And he's taken that online, and he's got a Facebook group called Living Happy with Zander Glasgow. And he started coaching after spending 29 years in recovery with the 12 Steps program. So welcome, Zander.
Hello.
Hello. So I'll just start by asking you how you came across the 3 principles and if it changed your life in any way. I know you went through the 12-step program, so I'd be interested to see how it compares with that.
Okay. That's a story in itself, all of it. Yeah, everything is everything we do, everything we experience becomes the story of me. And for me to do the comparison, that there really is, for me, it's all part of the same thing. So, and I was thinking, how far back do I go? My journey starts at age 24, when I suddenly realized that I had a problem. I was drinking too much. I was just causing trouble everywhere I went. And I sometimes forget just how trouble, how much trouble I was for everyone, and especially to myself. And I remember age 24, or even before age 24, something that I would say to myself quite often: there has got to be more to life than this. I was sitting in buses going to the Isle of Skye, 6-hour journeys, and quite often actually I was drunk, or I was taking something, but through that haze, almost every journey. I mean, there was other times as well, but these are the ones that I remember. These long journeys when I had nothing to do but think. You're sitting in the bus, you're there for 6 hours. There's loads of time to read, or I wasn't a reader. All I was doing was looking at a window. So with a blank mind, and through that haze, no matter what I was doing, what I was taking, or whatever, through that haze, I would think to myself quite often, there's got to be more to life than this. And I didn't really know what was wrong. But eventually, in 1992, when I was 24, I entered the 12-step program. And one of the things that we do, that we talk about, is that we talk about making some kind of conscious contact with a higher power of some sort, and it can be anything. And believe me, I've heard some stories. Some of them are funny. And actually, the co-founders, or at least one of the co-founders, had the foresight to write in one of his own writings: when you're doing this, when you're thinking about this, no, it's American. It's no bedside lamps or whatever, nightstands or whatever, none of that. That's so. What he's saying is, the number 9 boss isn't your higher power, right? Even if it gets you to a meeting of a 12-step program, that's not your higher, right? And there's other people have, but anyway. So I started reading. I started looking for. I suppose I was looking for something over and above or outside of the program, I suppose. And I started reading philosophy. I get very, very interested in psychology. That's never left me. You know, I've been looking at it. I've studied it in college and university, and I don't have a degree, but it's always been an interest. I was a painter and decorator. You know, when I left school, I went for training on a YTS scheme, youth training scheme. I was one of Maggie's Millions, as we knew them, and I painted, I decorated people's houses. And one thing that I found very quickly was that I didn't want to work for an employer. It just wasn't it was just not on my agenda at all. Although I have done, it's never appealed to me. So I get, let's see. Within a few years, I got quite heavily involved with Christianity, and quite heavily involved, probably for about 2 years. And then I started to, I think I'm a bit of a critical thinker. I tend to ask a lot of questions. Hence the Big Questions project, which only lasted, I'm kind of bringing that back actually. So I tend to ask a lot of questions, and when I started to ask questions that didn't seem to have answers, I very slowly turned my back on Christianity, and I looked towards other belief systems. And I was all in the houses, basically. I was just all over the place. So I left the Christian church, and in 1998 I got married. That lasted 4 years. That gets a quick mention, right? And I went to that was when I got, in 1989 or 90 or round about then, I entered college and university, and that's where that's when I done the social sciences, and I get interested in all sorts of how the mind works and how people work and all that sort of thing. And that's when I was introduced to the socialization process and agents of socialization. And when I found out about these things, it was like I had been living in a bubble for 29 years. I was 29 years of age at that time. I'd been living in a bubble, and everything that I thought was real and true just got blown out the water, really. And I fell into a really, really deep depression. And it lasted for a while. And no wonder I ended up getting divorced, right? Because that was, I mean, to try and describe, there was a point in time where I would joke actually afterwards that I was pining for my pine box, right? And I have this way of playing with words like that. And it was just, I really, if I wasn't such a coward, I wouldn't be here. That's how bad it was. And a few years later, I come to Belfast, and I've been here ever since. That was about 2002, because it was then that I met Sharon, the woman that I call these days. I call her the love of my life, and she was. And I'm going to get emotional because she's not with us anymore. And incidentally, I thoroughly meant to, before we started, I actually meant to say, and you're right up, Anne-Marie, for this event, you mentioned your cousin, and I wanted to stop just for a few moments to in honor of your cousin and anybody else who, others who aren't with us. So do you mind if we do that now? Just a few moments of silence, just to remember your cousin and other people who aren't with us.
No, that's fine.
Just take a deep breath and slow myself down and calm down. Okay. So after about 10 years, the first 10 years, actually the first 4 to 6 years of my relationship with Sharon was very tumultuous. It was because I was just so insecure, and full of fear. And we split up after 10 years. We started to drift apart, and by this time I was 17 years away from everything, the drugs, the alcohol, and everything else, apart from maybe food, overindulgence with food. That's never went away. Although I'm kind of getting to the point where I had quite an experience just last week, a couple of weeks ago, and so that's something that's being looked at now. But all I have to do is look at it. I don't have to do anything. But we'll maybe come to that. So we split up. Sharon and I split up for about 6 months, and because we drifted apart, I had moved, various circumstances and what have you. I had moved out of that, what you would call the family home, into a place of my own, and then not just into a place of my own. A year later, when I had been there a year, I moved across the city. So that sort of made me further away. And obviously, when I was back after 17 years, I started drinking again. I probably started other things that I'd stopped. And I was getting myself into a mess again. So we drifted apart. And then one day I realized that her son lived around the corner from me. And she was driving a car, and she was visiting him almost every single day. And I realized this, and I thought, oh, and that was when I realized that we'd been drifting apart, because she wasn't coming near me, you see. And I only seen her really about once a week at that time. So I went to her and I says, look, it's maybe time we take a wee break. And we were apart for about 6 months. And during that time, it was towards the summer of 2012. I had what I call a profound experience. And I've never really talked about it very much. Even in my group that I run on Facebook, I've made mention that I've kind of told the story maybe once. I've sort of skimmed over it, but at that time, and even since then, I've never known how to talk about it. It just it just will not verbal. I don't know how to verbalize it. And so, and even if I could, I think even Sydney Banks had trouble. He could tell you the story, but it can never be told. It's like trying to explain explain the scent of a rose. Explain the scent of a bunch of any kind of flower. You can talk about it. You could use certain descriptive words, but you'll never make the other person smell what it is you're right. And it's the same way any experience. I can tell you about how I fell in love with this, that, or the other, and I can never fully impart. It's just as has been said many times, it's something that can't be told. Yeah, it can't be imparted. You can't box it up and put it. It doesn't come in spray cans or anything. It's not there. And so what I realized, what happened after the 17 years and a year of drinking and whatever else I was doing and getting myself into office states, I decided to go back to the 12-step program, to go back to the fellowship. And I had trouble because of the experiences with the spiritual journey, I suppose. I don't like calling it that. It's to me, it's not a journey. It's a journey when you're going through it, but when you get to a certain thing, you look back and what was all that about? It wasn't a journey. I just thought it was a journey. It seemed like a journey. And again, that's just a metaphor, that it's a journey. There's nowhere to go. You haven't come from anywhere except for maybe a shift in the psychology, the paradigm shift. And so I had trouble. I was probably back for about 6 months, and one night I was in a meeting, and I got myself into such a mess because, and I had tears streaming down my face, and I said to people, and I don't know where to go with this. I've done the Christianity, I've looked at this, and this, and I just don't know where to go. But the messes that I've got myself in with my own self-will, the power of my own mind, it's not done me any good, because I've battled with this for years now, and I just don't know where to go. Tears, yeah, I was lost, totally lost. And a man walked up to me. He shook his head and walked away, and I was like, thanks, but he come back. But the thing is, what I didn't realize back at that time was that he walked away because, he shook his head at me. I'll never be able to explain that. But the reason he walked away was because someone else had already started talking to me. And the man, he come back with his phone number and he says, give me a call. And I went away. And a few days later, I was in his house. I went to visit him, and we talked for about 4 hours. And I don't have a clue what we talked about. I do not know. I don't remember. There is one thing that he said that will probably never go away. And he was talking about the whole God thing, right? And he said, the one thing that kept me going, or the one thing, something along the lines of, and I'll try not to curse here, but I am quoting someone else. Okay. He said, them might be right. So, yeah, okay. Well, that didn't really do anything for me, but it's kind of stuck. I thought it was funny. So I don't really recall anything that was said. So a few days later, I was on a bus. I was getting off a bus actually in the city centre here, and as if it was. I've always said it was an action of my own mind, but the thought just entered my head, right? And it was the way that thoughts always enter the head, right? The mind or whatever. It just was a thought. Thoughts enter, they come and go, and this one said, so what about this God thing then? Now, this was a couple of weeks after I had been at my friend's house, the man with the phone number and the shaky head. It was a couple of weeks later, and this thought came into my head. So what about this God thing then? Now, I've always said that was an action of my own mind. And what happened, what I say next is, as if from out with my own mind, the answer came back. It just is. And I had never, to the best of my knowledge, I had never heard that expression before. I may have done, but to the best of my knowledge, it was the first time, and it didn't come from me. I know it didn't come from me. as I say, as if from outside me, it came to me. It just is. And in that moment, it just, a smile, this great big massive smile. It's like a Cheshire cat. And all the previous experiences, the stories, the explanations, the reasoning, the battles, the fears, all the stories of my life, stories of me and what happened, and absolutely everything became just irrelevant, null, void. And it was like I had been wearing, I mean, it was almost the exact opposite from when I found out about the socialization process and the agents of, but this time it was much deeper. It was that this thing, I mean, everything, the first time I fell into a deep depression, this lifted me right out of everything that I'd ever, that, and it's difficult to explain. It really is. So it was like my whole life in that moment, it was like as if I'd been wearing a hazmat suit my whole life, and I was restricted by this hazmat suit that covered me head to toe, but I had the helmet on backwards. Right? There was no window here. I couldn't see. And suddenly this hazmat suit just fell from me. And the whole weight of the world and my everything, it just fell from me. And I just suddenly felt so free. I've never felt, well, actually, that the feeling has never left me. It was, suffice to say, it was an extremely liberating experience. you know, um, I just felt at peace, and that sort of became a foundation. Instead of my base mood or attitude or whatever being way low down, it raised somewhat, right? Um, and, and as I say, I didn't know how to talk about it. And I made many attempts. I would, I don't know, but one of the thoughts that I had at the time was that if for all these years I've been in this 12-step program, and I'm being told to look for or try to find some kind of connection with a higher power that's going to, save me, as it were, right? I kind of laugh at that these days, but that's okay. That's just me. I don't laugh at other people. I only laugh at, anyway. So if I've got to rely on this, and as it come to me as just is, if it just is, and I'm going to rely on it, then I can just be. I can relax. And I became so relaxed. Before that, I was on edge. I was told by a psychologist one time that I was a type A, I think it was a type A personality, somebody who's always on edge and ready to go. And then it was years later, it was afterwards. And then I had another psychological test for some reason, and I come back as a type B personality. There is, apparently there's only two. And I had become totally the opposite of what I previously was. I would have fought with anybody at the drop of a hat at one time. I was a very angry wee man, and a very nasty wee man as well. And also, I wasn't a wee man; I was a wee child, really. Because it was. I mean, imagine an adult suffering with the tantrums of a child with a terrible twos. You know, that just crazy. And so if it just is, and I'm relying on it, then I can just be. I can relax. And another way that I sort of explained or I talked about it was that the small part that's in me is the exact same as the big part that's out there. Now, this is at a time before I'd even heard about the three principles. I've still not heard about the three principles yet. And ultimately, the thing that I kept on saying, because I had trouble talking about it, the experience and what I'd realised, and the one thing that I kept on saying, and I still say even now, is that it's all just stories that we tell ourselves, all of it. And then, so after that experience, I remembered a part that I'd read in a book. How much time do we have, by the way? You know,
until 7:30 our time.
Right, I'll try and keep it to just another 10, 15 minutes, just to. So I remember the reading that I'd heard that one of the founders of the 12-step program referred to the program or the fellowship as a spiritual kindergarten. Now, in American terms, that means nursery school in the UK. So, and I thought about that for a while, and I thought, wait a minute. Now, I heard that 20 years prior to, or a lot of years prior to, but it never occurred to me to think, well, pardon me, if this fellowship, this 12-step program is a spiritual kindergarten, then where is spiritual secondary education? But not only that, if I could find that, that would be good. But even more than that, where is further and higher education? I wanted the doctorate, right? You know, the A level or whatever, you know, that wasn't good enough for me. I wanted to go as high as I could. And I've thought about that for every waking moment for a long time. So I started to form my own ideas. And I met a guy who's still my friend today. And he is extremely well read. He's just spent months, years reading book after book after book. And it's not just the wee small stuff. So him and I have had loads and loads and loads of discussions about this sort of thing. And I would try to, at one point I was going through it and I tried to tell him what it is I believe. And he would come up with words like existentialism and some other word. And every time he would mention one of these words, I would go and look it up. I would come home and go on the internet, have a look. Say, no, that's not it. And I'd go back to him and say, you know, that's not it. I can see how you might think that, but that's not quite it. And this happened 3 or 4 times. And then one time he said, I took the time and explained fully what I had come to understand, how I understand how life works. And he says to me, he says, that's non-duality. So this was another one of these words. Now, right, okay, well, let's go and have a wee look on the internet and see what that is. And it was almost there, not quite, right? So that was, after that, I found myself 2016, 2 years before I came across the 3 principles through the community here in Belfast. I was standing, Pat will know that familiar with the road, Antrim Road. I was standing in a room, a group of people, and I was explaining to them how that thoughts carry emotion. But the difference is that I had only grasped that intellectually. I had not linked that to any kind of, there was no spiritual knowledge, no spiritual connection to that whatsoever at that time. And really trying to explain it was miles above me. And the truth is, I felt out of my depth. I could talk about it, and I tried to explain it, but I couldn't. I just couldn't. 2017, Sharon was diagnosed with cancer, and that kind of stopped everything, all the groups, all the discussions, everything. And she passed away in 20 June of 2018. And you can hear me starting to stutter there. So if I dwell on that too much, you know what happens. And so about 6 months later, about 3 or 4 months later, I walked through this door behind me. Behind that curtain's my door, behind that door is my front door. And I walked in the house and I leant against that wall and I said to myself, I am lonely. And I repeated those words, but there was a swear word, a curse word in there. And I said, I am lonely. I am lonely. And that was when I started. I wanted to sort of start creating a community. And I wanted that community to help people. And that was when I started what I called Build a Network, BILD. It was Belfast Isolation, Loneliness and Depression. And at that time, it's funny now, but I used to say that I'm prone to depression. Imagine allowing yourself to believe that. You know, I don't believe that anymore. I'm only prone to depression if I believe I'm prone to depression. And I want to swear, and I really do want to swear, because that is a lie I told myself for so long. And so many lies have I told myself for so long, that I was unlovable, that I wasn't good enough, that, I don't know, to go through it all, you know. But so in December, 6 months after Sharon passed away, December 2018, I decided that because things weren't rolling along quite the way I wanted it to, I thought, let's see if there's any other social stuff that I can get involved with. And then I looked at the meetup.com website, and here I see this thing called 3 Principles Community or something. I don't remember what it was called or is called. I don't look at it that much. I just know when the meetings are on. And I thought, well, okay, that sounds interesting. I'll go for that. It seems to be a bit spiritual. So, and lo and behold, it was right. It was just, it was bullseye for me. It was bullseye. And it was so much bullseye, I thought, heard it said before, no, I mean, if I had met Sydney Banks, I would probably have said to him, it can't be that simple. You know the way he describes other people have said to him? I would have been one of those people. And I started to look for holes in it. But that was 2018. That was 2 years ago. 2 years. 2018, 2020, 20, 3 years ago. Yeah. I'm no good with mental arithmetic. 3 years ago. And so I've come full circle. And what the 3 principles understanding has done for me, it's enabled me to put into words all the important insights and understanding, and that I had somehow come to some level of understanding of over that 30 or so years, that journey, in inverted commas. And the result is that, I actually love the term 3 Principles Community, because it truly matches 100% what I have come to understand as the ultimate definition of the word community. And I was talking to my friend today, that very close friend who I had loads and loads of conversations with. He's kind of in a mess at the moment. And I says to him, it looks like you are in exactly the same place I was. And I reminded him, oops, my camera's gone off by its own. It does that. It started doing that for some reason. And I said, what you need to do is, I was looking for community. And then when I couldn't find it, I tried to create a community, and I'm still trying to create that community. But the community that is, I mean, I just love the term Three Principles community, because it really is all inclusive. And that's what community is. It's no, I mean, here in Belfast, right, you've got this community and it's all one side. And you've got over here, you've got this other community and it's all the other side. These ones are green and these ones are orange or whatever color they want to be, right? And that's no community, because these ones are only included. But community is all inclusive. True community, it's all inclusive. And the people that I've met in the Three Principles community, wow, all over the world. And in comparison to Alcoholics Anonymous, I can go anywhere in the world. I've just mentioned the name of the 12-step program that I'm involved in. I'm not supposed to do that because traditions of that say that we're supposed to remain anonymous. Hey, it doesn't matter. It doesn't even need to be edited. It's unintentional. At one time, I would have said that was the most democratic community, all-inclusive community that I'd ever. But, you know, it just doesn't quite match up. It really doesn't, to the Three Principles community. And I'm not looking for favors. I'm not being paid to say that, right? If only. But it's yeah. Come home. Yeah. Come home before you have to go home. That's what I say. That's me.
I think because you mentioned this 12-step program, from what I know about it, it's very entrenched in Christianity, or that traditionally, I think it was. I don't know if it's still the same case now. So maybe that's the difference between the Three Principles, because it's still a spiritual community, but Sydney Banks was very much about just practice whatever religion you believe in, whatever you believe in, that's fine, because they're all pointed to the same thing. So I don't know. I mean, maybe you can talk to that. I don't know whether that's the difference.
At its conception, the Alcoholics Anonymous is the first ever 12-step program, and at its conception, they had no formation, as it were. So they formed the earliest alcoholics of Alcoholics Anonymous joined what was called the Oxford groups, which was a Christian movement, and it didn't take long before they moved away from that. But because they had their own, because they didn't have, in the first few years, they didn't have any sort of their own book or literature or anything like that. Incidentally, the book's called Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's where the fellowship takes its name from. The books, the fellowship, the group of people, the fellowship's named after the book as opposed to the other way around. And because they had none of their own literature in the first years, they would read the book of James out of the Bible. There are a lot of people, especially it used to be that it wouldn't 15, 20 years ago, you wouldn't have heard anybody talking about Christianity in any AA meeting. But these days it's kind of growing. But really it's about a power of your own understanding, a higher power. And what they normally say is a higher power or a God of your own understanding. And I would say, well, I don't understand that, and I choose not to call it God. I've always been a bit of a rebel that way. So it's not supposed to be, and at its conception, it was initially had a home within Christianity, I suppose. But it quickly left that because a lot of people were saying, well, if it's Christian, then it's close to other people. And they wanted it to be open to everybody, and that's how it became a wider, all-inclusive, believe what you like, sort of God of your own understanding. sort of thing. So no, it's not supposed to be a Christian movement, but sometimes you would wonder. Anyway,
I suppose that's the difference between the three principles as well, is that we talk about universal mind, which we can refer to as God if you wish to refer to it as God. I was brought up Catholic, so I would refer to it as God, but you may prefer to use the term universal mind, but it's whatever you think of as the spiritual connection of life, I suppose. Whatever you see that as, whether it's the universe or Mother Nature or whatever.
I've used a few terms over the years, I suppose. I think the term I would use at the moment, and I think it's kind of shift. If I talk about the absolute, then it involves or includes absolutely everything. That's the absolute. So that's I suppose that's my choice word. However, having said that, when we at the end of a meeting, an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, it doesn't matter. I've mentioned it now anyway. So once once the horse bolts,
Sorry,
sorry.
I was just going to say, I think if it's your choice not to be anonymous, they can't really hold that against you, can they? Because it's you as an individual choosing not to be anonymous.
Yeah, I mean, it's an individual thing, I'm not looking for what the tradition says is that we should remain anonymous at the level of press, radio, and film. But that's kind of changed recently to include the internet. But yeah. So.
Sorry to interrupt. I'm just thinking Russell Brand. I don't know whether you know much about what he's doing these days, but he went through the 12-step program and he's very vocal about what he's learned. So, I think if you're a celebrity and you're okay to say it, maybe you're okay to say it too. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, I got a copy of his book, actually. I think it's called Recovery. And I know it's in this, it ran away from me. It's in this house somewhere. And, occasionally I'll think, what did I do with that? I thought I put it in my bag. It went in my backpack. I always carry a backpack. I'll find it when I need to, But, yeah, I'm very aware of. I mean, he's sort of become a bit of an activist in that way because he was involved with Amy Winehouse. So, yeah, he's very outspoken about it because, I mean, he lost somebody that was close to him. I don't know the exact extent of that relationship. I don't know. I think they were a couple at one time. I'm not sure, but they were at least friends. So he's lost someone who was close to him. So, and then his own struggles, I suppose. Yeah. So, yeah, he's definitely. He's definitely a bit of an activist in other ways as well, but certainly in that way. Yeah.
We've got 15 minutes left, so I'm going to open it up just in case Sharon or Pat have anything they'd like to say, ask or comment.
I just want to thank you, Zander. Fascinating story. Wow, and so vulnerable to share it all. I'm not that brave, so I appreciate that. You've come a long way, and yeah, thank you for sharing. And I never can remember anything. I always get a feeling. So I I'm always like trying to wait. What was it that I heard? And I feel a lot better after listening to you. So thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, Sid always talked about listen to a feeling, see beyond with the words, didn't he?
Yeah. Um, I don't know how to talk about that, but I I want the feeling to change. Not that it's bad, but I I'm designing a course at the moment, actually, and the if you consider that that there's a sort of psychological element, and there's a spiritual element, but it's all the same thing. I remember saying to my friend that I was talking about I was talking about earlier, the one that with many discussions. I remember saying to him, do you have you ever heard of a book called The Psychology of Religion? And he said no. And the reason he said no, and probably the reason he never heard of it, was because it didn't exist. I looked for it. It didn't exist, but it does now. Someone's written it. I found, I was actually, I'm in the process. I'm thinking, and it's supposed to have been done this week, but I talked about it on Sunday with somebody, and I was I'm gonna open a page or something that's going to be my strictly three principles page on Facebook. So that's my three principles presence on Facebook, because what I'm doing at the moment, it's sort of mixed with the other stuff. My whole experience is informing that, if you will. So I want this new page to be strictly three principles. So I'm doing a lot of the sort of psychology stuff. I think the spiritual stuff or the spiritual element can sometimes be forgotten, because we talk about thought and feeling, and and we quite often forget about the spiritual. And I don't. For me, spirituality is about find out who you are. And where I'm coming from and how I understand it is that if you want to find out who you are, then you have to first find out who you're not. So it's like there's a term for that. I call it there's a process of elimination, and there's somewhere in Sydney Banks's talks, he talks about in one of his videos, he says something to the effect of, without mind and without consciousness and without thought, you're left with nothing. And then he kind of chuckles a wee bit and he says, and that's what you're looking for. And then he continues what he was saying. And I caught that. And in that nothingness that he chuckled about is the space, what I call the space between two thoughts, any two thoughts. And that's where the spirituality is in the psychology for me. And that's just the best way I have to explain or talk about it right now. I'm not explaining anything. I'm just talking about how I understand. So I'm not in teaching mode. So if I want to develop that, then I want that feeling to develop. I want that feeling to change. I want it to grow, to be deeper, to be more profound. And for me, it has done over the years, and it's taken years. So yeah, yeah. So I'm wary of getting stuck in any particular state. And every time when I'm looking for that feeling, we talk about meditation. And Sid Banks, that's why people meditate. They're looking for that feeling. Yeah, and it's calming and relaxing, and it feels good. But if I get stuck, then I once read a book called Something More by Catherine Marshall. It's kind of Christian in its elements, and it's basically what it said is that no matter how much you think you know, it's called something more, right? There's always something more, always, and that's what I'm looking for. That's the further and higher education, and I'll never get a degree. The day I get my degree, I'll be in that pine box that I used to want. I don't want it anymore, but you know, I don't get to choose.
Listening to you talk reminds me of a few things I've heard, a few 3 principles people say recently, which is to say I don't know is a great thing to say. I mean, often in a previous lifetime, I don't know about yourself, if you said you didn't know something, you felt like people would think you're stupid, but it's in the not knowing that gives you space to know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm giving myself chills just saying that now, just thinking about it. The not knowing gives you the space to know.
You're making me smile. Well, you're not making me smile, but I'm smiling because I often say that the wisest words I've ever heard were, "I don't know." Where are we? Where do we come from? I don't know. Where are we going? I don't know. What are we here for? I don't know. That's just wisdom. You know, that's not dumb. That's amazing. You know. Sorry, but yeah.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Oh, we've got 7 minutes left. Do you got anything else you'd like to add?
If just one thing, I think that if spirituality is about finding out who you are, if spirituality is about finding out who am I, then anything that I can experience in this physical world, in the phenomenal plane, if you want to call it that, anything that I can experience, whether it's touch, smell, sight, whatever I can experience, that's not it. And I've always, well, since I entered, when I went to look for help and I got into the 12-step program, I've always been, the first thing I says to my friend when we started all these discussions, one of the first discussions I says to him, he's very religious in his ways, and he reads about religion, he learns about religion, he knows all the theories and explanations, what have you. And I says to him, no, I'm looking for the experience. And whatever I can experience of the phenomenal world, if I'm looking for who am I, not what is this? I know what this is, but who am I at the essence? Anything that I can experience, that's not it.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Zander. And thanks for everybody else who's on the Zoom. And I hope to see you all soon.
Thank you for this opportunity, Anne-Marie.
That's okay, no problem. Lovely speaking to you, listening
Thank
to
you.
you. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.